You hear it everywhere. That one word popping up in the news, in discussions about the economy, about the future.
China.
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 China. China.
Think about it. 2,000 years ago, China built its Great Wall, an actual physical wall of stone and earth. Fast forward to today, and the US is building its own kind of wall against China. But this one, it's not stones and bricks. It's all about customs tariffs. And you hear these pretty strong statements like,
"We're going to build a wall. It's going to be built." It's not even, believe it or not, it's not even a difficult thing to do.
So, you've got these two massive powers, right? One in the far east, the other in the far west, kind of locked in this intense dance across the Pacific. And it's not just their problems. These are issues that affect all of us. Seriously, the whole future of the global economy could be decided by how this competition between these two giants plays out. Now, if you're listening to the talk coming out of the US, especially a few years back, you'd get a real sense of their stance on trade. It often sounded something like this.
I'm telling you, these countries are calling us up, kissing my ass. They are dying to make a deal. Please, please, sir, make a deal. I'll do anything. I'll do anything, sir.
And boy, did things escalate. 1 April, US President Donald Trump hits China with tariffs of up to 104% on all their products coming into the US. Of course, Beijing didn't just sit there. A few hours later, China fires back, announcing its own 84% tariffs on US goods and even restricting exports of some key stuff. This kind of showdown, it shakes the entire global economic order. It might look like it happened in a single day, but this whole thing didn't just pop up overnight. It's been brewing for nearly 40 years, all the way back to 1978. That's when China really started to change things up, opening its economy and slowly moving away from that strict old communist system. And from the 80s onwards, they started sending a lot of products made with cheap labor over to the US. The US ended up with a big trade deficit, and for China, a big surplus. Then, China joins the World Trade Organization in 2001, and their export numbers just exploded from $266 billion in 2001 to a massive $1.4 trillion by 2008. You had China saving and the US consuming. People even started calling it Chimerica, China and America like Siamese twins, totally dependent on each other for trade. Then came the 2008 global financial crisis. Remember that? It really showed how strong China was getting. While the US economy actually shrank by almost 2%, China's grew by nearly 10%. But here's the kicker. China's success wasn't really about playing by the standard liberal market economics rulebook. It was more about long-term, state-control planning. Think supportive exchange rates, subsidies, loans, big investments in infrastructure, all part of a state capitalism that kept production costs in check. Now, if you're sitting in the White House, you've got to pay attention to this. The thinking goes,
you're the American president. You have to pay a lot of attention to that because your job is to create a lot of jobs in American society. And if you don't have Chinese consumers being engaged in buying American products and Chinese investors can't invest in the United States and create more American jobs, then you'd be in trouble.
Makes sense, right? So, China sees where things are heading, and on May 19th, 2015, they roll out this massive plan, Made in China 2025. This wasn't just a catchy name. They started pouring money into 10 super important high-tech areas. We're talking electric cars, IT, telecoms, AI, advanced robots, farming tech, aerospace, maritime engineering, biomedicine, even fancy new railways. And pretty quickly, brands we all know now, like Huawei, ZTE, DJI, and BYD, they just exploded onto the global scene. But hold on, by 2018, the US and Europe started getting pretty vocal. They're looking at all this state support for Chinese tech and saying, hey, this isn't fair competition. They had a whole list of complaints, didn't they? Worries about trade deficits, making them vulnerable, national security threats, intellectual property rights being violated, tech being unfairly transferred, even espionage and theft. Basically, They argued China's state-backed capitalism was rigging the game. Talk is cheap, right? Soon, those words turned into some serious action. You might remember sound bites like,
"This morning, we're taking an additional step forward. We're bringing a new trade case against China, and we're being joined by Japan and some of our European allies."
That was a clear sign. Protectionism was back on the table. When Trump became president in 2017, the U.S. trade deficit with China was huge, like $375 billion. So, in March 2018, he really started building that wall, putting 25% tariffs on $50 billion worth of Chinese goods, plus 25% and 10% duties on their steel and aluminum. And it didn't stop there. Later that year, he announced plans for more tariffs on another $267 billion of imports. China naturally hit back with their own tariffs of equal value, tit for tat. And it wasn't just about slapping tariffs on everything. Nope, things got personal, targeting specific companies. ZTE and Huawei got accused of selling tech to Iran. The U.S. kept tightening the screws on them, especially with things like microchip supplies. Remember when Huawei's CFO was arrested in Canada back in December 2018 over sanctions against Iran? That was huge. Then Chinese DJI drones got banned in the U.S., with national security being the reason. And BYD, the electric vehicle maker, their U.S. activities got restricted too, because they were seen as a threat to Tesla. Then COVID hit in 2020. You'd think things might cool down a bit with the trade war, and they did a little. But one thing became super clear in the U.S. Whether you were a Democrat or a Republican, being cautious and restrictive about trade with China was something everyone pretty much agreed on. And China, they just kept pushing forward with their Made in China 2025 goals. All those U.S. barriers, they kind of pushed Beijing to double down on their own innovation. And it worked. A Bloomberg report from back in October 2024 showed China had become a world leader in some really key tech areas: drones, solar panels, graphene, high-speed rail, electric vehicles, and lithium batteries. The tech race with the U.S.? It was definitely neck and neck. So, what if Trump made a comeback for a second term? The game plan seemed pretty obvious. As he put it himself,
Oh, I think the tariffs are going to be the greatest thing we've ever done as a country. It's going to make our country rich again.
Yep, tariffs looked like they'd be his main weapon against Beijing. And then you had the bans on things like Chinese-owned TikTok and that AI software DeepSeek, all because they were supposedly a threat to U.S. national security. More bricks in that wall. Plus, there are all those accusations flying around about China playing games with its currency.
They're manipulating their currency today as an offset against the tariffs. Not supposed to do that. The game isn't supposed to be played that way.
So, in February of another period, Trump put a 10% tariff on Chinese imports. China hits back with 15% on U.S. coal and natural gas, and 10% on U.S. crude oil, farm machinery, and big cars. Then, in April, Trump really ups the ante. Tariffs jacked up to 125%. China's response? First 84%, then they match it, 125%. So where does all this leave us? Economists are scratching their heads. The world's on edge. And the World Bank? They're warning this could seriously shrink global trade. We're talking up to an 80% drop in trade between the US and China, and maybe a 7% hit to global GDP. That's massive. With these two giants so tangled up economically, you have to wonder, maybe the real question isn't who's going to win this trade war, but who's going to lose the most. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and watch our videos.